Welcome. This is Jason Clemmons, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We are live right here in the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas, and we're live on 98.7 Walk by Faith Radio and 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation, 987radio.com. We're on our social media pages at the Rock Health and Wellness Centers on Facebook, at Health from the Rock on YouTube, and Jason Clemmons, DC on X. And I believe, let me make double sure that we are, because last night we had a little glitch getting set up, and I want you guys to get all this information tonight. Yep, there we are, and we're good to go, and we're live. So we are rocking and rolling. I hope you guys had a great day. This is part 3 of the practice of chiropractic, and we've spent the last 2 nights really diving into how chiropractic works in our office, what I'm doing in when I'm evaluating you as a new patient, what I'm doing as I'm trying to understand how your body's working, and the things that I'm doing to try to improve your health. And so we've really been walking through this, and we've just got so much to cover that we're just going to get right into it and continue on from where we were last night. And I really want to get into the power of the adjustment. So if you missed last night's show or Tuesday night show, please go back and watch those, especially if you're new to our office. If you've been watching the show for a long time, this is probably really old stuff, and you've heard it so many times you're probably sick of it by now. But it's really amazing, because every time that I teach it, I even learn a little bit more about it, and it really carries through my day, thinking about some of this stuff and the things that I could do to improve my own health. So if you didn't go back and watch Tuesday, watch last night's show, and then we're just going to pick up from where we were last night, and we're going to continue forward, because I think once you start to really understand this right side, left side brain function, and you start to say, okay, wait a minute, if I was to just put my fingers right here underneath my earlobes, and I was to just say, okay, how much function is happening below that level? And there's a lot. There's a lot of function that happens right there below that level. But almost all of that function is being driven by what's above that level. And so when you approach your health and you don't take into consideration how your brain is functioning, then it can be a hit or miss thing that's happening. So last night, what we were talking about is we were talking about we were talking about, like, what happens if we get stuck over there in that right hemisphere. And I know you guys have heard this lots of times, but please bear with me, because there's some new people that are in the office, and I really do want them to hear this information. And we've got some people that are soon to join our practice, and they're watching the show too. And so welcome to all of you people, that everyone out there that is new to the practice, and that is going to be new to the practice, because I know we've got some of you coming this way, and you're watching this show because you want to know what's going on. And I want you to know what's going on, so that when you get here, you know what to expect and what we're going to do in the office. But it really does kind of, I think it helps if we can make it simple enough that we can understand it. I think it helps each one of us empower ourselves to be healthier. I mean, when you get hope, like that to me is a big deal. When you lose hope, it's a big deal. And when you gain hope, it's a big deal. So last night, what we were talking about is, let's take a real quick recap of that right hemisphere dealing with the unknown world, right? The unknown. And unknown means, is it threatening? It's the coolest thing. If you walk up, if you have a toddler, maybe a little guy, 6, 8, 10 months, something like that. Yeah, maybe a year old. If you have a young child, and I'll have a young child in the office, and mom will be holding that young child, and I'll have my activator is what I usually have. But if I was to have this pin right here, and I was to walk right up to that child, and I was just to stick that pin out right in front of them, the first thing that child's going to do almost always is that child's going to back up. They're going to turn away from me. They're going to turn towards their mom, and they're going to back up away. They're going to pull themselves in. They're going to contract their muscles and pull themselves in because they're not sure what that is. It's unknown to them. Like this, what is that thing that you got? I got a highlighter for you guys on the radio, but if I was to just take this highlighter and I just like reach out to a child that doesn't know me, doesn't know the environment, and they don't know what I'm doing, a lot of times they'll back up. And so what I'll do is I'll just hold that highlighter out to them. It's my activator because I'm about to adjust them with the activator, and I want them to see it so that they're not scared of it, right? And what does that mean? That they're not scared of it? Well, they're processing it in their right hemisphere. And so what I'll do is I'll just hold it and I'll just with my face and my tone of voice, I'll say, it's okay. It's okay. You can hold it. It's okay. And I'll just hold it there. And then a lot of times they'll be hesitant for a second, and then maybe they'll even look at their mom for a second, and then they'll look back and then they'll reach out with their right hand to grab the highlighter. And I know when that happens, they've transferred that information to a left hemisphere exploratory, detail-oriented function now. What they've done is they've taken that unknown threat, they determined that this was no longer threatening. They were no longer going to get in trouble if they touched it. They were no longer going to be hurt if they touched it. They took it out of the right hemisphere and they moved it over into the left hemisphere, and the left hemisphere runs the right hand. So a lot of times that child will reach with that right hand to grab. Why are they grabbing? Why are they grabbing with their right hand? They're grabbing because they're trying to learn the details of their environment. That's what's happening. That's what we do. We're not going to break down the details if we feel threatened. We're not. It's because it doesn't even make any logical sense, right? So we deal with this right hemisphere overactivation. And if you think about it, like how many moments in a day do we deal with unknown things? And we had a show on it last week about with the light bulbs and the lamps that we were talking about, right? But we've got this unknown, and what happens in this right hemisphere is that unknown fires our sympathetic fight or flight response. And there is a neurology and a physiology inside our bodies that goes along with this sympathetic fight or flight response. And hang with me on this, because as we move through this, you'll start to see how it affects the physical body. It'll start to, I'll show you some of the things that it does to affect the physical body. But this anxiety from being unknown, like if we don't know where we're going to get our next meal, if we don't know if we're like how our job's going to go, if we don't know, I had a youngster today, a young girl that has a job, and the person that she works with is very difficult to work with. And she's like, this day, she said, man, it was a long day. And I was trying to coach her up a little bit, and I was like, because she's relatively new to the practice, and I said, well, you do realize every day has 24 hours. They're exactly the same length. And she said, yeah, but not this one. And I was like, not when you're dealing with stupid people. That's what she said. And I said, well, if it wasn't for the stupid people, you wouldn't have a job. And she's like, no, this person I work with. And I was like, oh, dang. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm out of coaching tips right now. It's like, this is really hard. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. I've heard that said before. So, but the unknown of how every day is going to go with that person. Like when you walk into work and you're not exactly sure exactly what kind of interaction you're going to have with that person. It's like, oh no, like I'm dreading that, right? I got a knot in my stomach. I'm really not looking forward to this, right? And what's happening is you're staying over here in this right hemisphere that you're only supposed to be in for 90 seconds or less. Because in real nature, threats happens very quickly. They happen, and you either get eaten or killed by the threat, or you kill the threat, or you get away from each other. And it's not going to last all day long. It's a quick event. And so when we get stuck over here in the right brain and we spend too much time in the right brain and we fire this sympathetic response, what it's going to do is it's going to fire down to our adrenal glands, and our adrenal glands are going to release cortisol. Now we're going to start to get into a bunch of different things. Like we're going to get, whenever we fire cortisol, we're going to end up increasing, that will increase our blood sugar. Because really what our brain is trying to do is get us ready to fight or run. So someone that's stressed out is going to gain a lot of weight because they're not going to be able to control their insulin because their blood sugar is going to be going up. And this is a great poster. I had it pulled up when we started the show, but this is a great poster by a chiropractor. And I know it's a little small to see, but it's really great. It's called The Power of an Adjustment. But what I want you to see with this poster is that, and you can I know you can't hardly read that, but there's a neurology that goes along with stress. You know, a lot of times we just say, I'm stressed, kind of like it's the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus or something like that, right? And it's like, no, stress has a neurology. Stress has a physiology. And the first thing that happens in this stressful event is this amygdala gets fired. And the amygdala is the memory center of every stressful event that you've ever had in your entire life. It's that thing that keeps you from just walking back out into traffic or something. It's like, or you got to be careful, man. You're up next to the edge of the cliff. It's like, whoa, hold on a second. Those things are stressful. Like, don't drive so fast in traffic. You're going to hurt somebody, or whatever the thing might be. Like, be aware, be vigilant. I'm going to get into that in just a second. But that amygdala is going to fire, and now that amygdala, when it starts to open up, it's just like a little flower. It'll start to open up, and if you get stressed out right now, then it won't take 2 seconds, and you'll remember what you were stressed out about 3 weeks ago. And it won't take 2 more seconds, and 20 years might come back and be like, oh, all of a sudden it's like I'm stressed again, right? And then that amygdala is gonna fire this other little part of your brain called the locus coeruleus. And the locus coeruleus is gonna release adrenaline. You're gonna get this rush, this epinephrine, norepinephrine in your brain. And the right hemisphere of the brain has an affinity. It has an affinity for adrenaline. The right hemisphere does. And so you're going to get this adrenaline that's released over here in the right hemisphere. Because now we got to get some blood pumping. What is that? We got to be very aware of what's going on in our environment. We got to get our heart rate up, we got to get our blood pressure up. I mean, it's time to fight or run. It's like we got to get all those things to happen on that right hemisphere. And so then that locus coeruleus is going to fire down. It's going to fire across to this adrenal gland. So now you're going to get that adrenal gland and the cortisol involved. And then you're going to get this HPA axis involved. Let me switch back over. And so you may have heard of this before. And the HPA axis is the hypothalamic pituitary axis. And when you fire that this HPA axis over and over and over and over again, some of the things that will show up is anxiety, depression, increased aging, You ever see anybody that's been through lots of stress and they just look old? You see them and then you hadn't seen them for a while, and then you come back and you see them again, and it's like, man, that guy looks like he's aged years, right? Because that stress response has been firing and firing, right? We'll get ADD or ADHD. We'll get type 2 diabetes because we can't control our cortisol and it can't control our blood sugar. So our insulin's going to be all out of whack. We're going to gain obesity, especially around the middle of our body, called centripetal obesity, where now we're going to start getting fat deposits around our liver, and we're going to develop fatty liver disease that goes along with type 2 diabetes. And if you have type 2 diabetes, you have liver disease. Don't let anybody tell you different on that. Those two things go hand in hand together. And then trouble sleeping and high cholesterol. Why would you go to sleep if there's a threat in your room, right? It's like, man, I just can't get my brain to turn off. It's like all day long I'm dealing with all that sort of thing. And that's what happens when we get stuck over there in that right hemisphere. Well, when we get stuck in the right hemisphere, then we don't send the power over to the left hemisphere. And this is where I want to talk about a couple of different things. And I want to talk about attention right now. And when you study attention, there are 5 different types of attention. There's what we call the intensity axis of attention is vigilance, sustained attention, and alertness. And we talked about this same thing last week, but it's like I can look at you, I can look directly at the screen, at the camera, and I can see the cars going down the street through the window over here. I can see the television that's on the wall. There's a truck coming down the street right now. It's right there. Yep, you might even heard it right there. You might get to hear it through the walls, right? That's my ability to stay focused is a left hemisphere function, and my ability to stay vigilant and alert is a right hemisphere function. So when a person has overstimulation of their right hemisphere, then what they're going to have is overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, overactivation of the amygdala, which is going to be overactivation of the adrenal gland. You may have heard of the term adrenal fatigue. Adrenal fatigue is an end result of, it's either a nutritional deficiency issue or it's an overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. And there's a bunch of things that go along with like obesity, GERD, fibromyalgia, ulcerative colitis. A lot of these things go along with this overactivation of this sympathetic nervous system. So we're stuck over here, and we're stuck on, it's really hard for me to pay attention to you because I'm really looking around because I feel threatened, like there's somebody in here, and I don't know if there's something in here, or it's like I'm trying to listen to what you're saying. You're trying to listen to what I'm saying, but we're really just paying attention to the world around us. Sounds like a little ADHD type kid, right? And I'm gonna pull that in just a second because there's 5 types of attention, and 4 types of attention are dealt with in the right hemisphere of the brain. Only focused attention is in the left. Now the left, we said the right side had an affinity for adrenaline. Well, the left side has an affinity for dopamine. That's the neurotransmitter of motivation. It's what keeps us going, right? So this left side also has focused attention. And if I've got disruption, if I've got the power coming up and to the right, but I'm not getting it across to the left, then I'm getting understimulation of the left hemisphere, which means I'm getting understimulation of the focused attention aspect of my brain. That means I'm having a really hard time focusing on anything. There's your ADD, ADHD kid, right? They're overactive. They got overactivity of their right hemisphere, and they've got underactivity of their left hemisphere. And because they have underactivity of their left hemisphere, now what they're going to get is they're going to get depression. So the anxiety came from the initial overactivation of the right hemisphere, but the depression comes from the delayed underactivation of the left hemisphere. That's where you're like your SSRIs and everybody, you say I'm depressed. They're going to give you that because serotonin is dealt with over there in that left hemisphere. That's kind of our happy place. A person that has right hemisphere deficits will have what's called undue cheerfulness. You'll have undue cheerfulness. Because you don't ever see any threat. There's nothing threatening you, so why wouldn't you be happy? I mean, daggum. If you got it made and there's no threats, then it's just like, well, I'm just cheerful. I'm cheerful for no reason, and that could be, that could be a problem if it's not good for us. You can get yourself into some situations that are not fabulous for you if you're not paying attention, if you're not vigilant and alert on that other side. So we're losing the right side and left side balance. And when we lose the right side and left side balance, then we start to have bad health. So I've shown it to you tonight in the way that we're looking at all this stuff. Just remember, the right brain is threat, it's unknown, it's sympathetic nervous system, it's 4 types of attention, and the left brain is no threat, it's known world, it's parasympathetic or rest and recover. Like one of the things, and then it's focused attention. So one of the things that happens in the left hemisphere is the left hemisphere deals with all the sphincters in your body that are not under conscious control. Like the sphincter between your stomach and your esophagus. Let's use that one because GERD is a good example, right? We've got people say, well, okay. And this is where we start to get into where we start to get into the difference, the effect. Like what effect does it have on you, right? Because that's what you really want to know is what effect does it have on you? Like when your batteries go low. This is a great example right now. This is a great example. My red light just came on my speaker, my microphone right here that's on all of my social media. Okay, this microphone right here goes to the radio station, and this little microphone that I have over here has a red light on it. Right? So I'm trying to focus on what I'm talking about, and I'm trying to explain something that I think is very important to you. But now all of a sudden, I look down and I see that little red light over there, and it's threatening to me. All of a sudden, I'm threatened because you know what that means? I'm about to lose my sound on all of my social media. If that red light goes off and I lose it and this thing dies, because that's a warning to me, that's a warning shot. And all of a sudden, when I'm talking very specific about what's going on in the brain and in my brain now, instead of being focused on what I'm talking about, I just switched back over and overactivated my right hemisphere because I'm worried about this light going off. And so now I'm trying to talk to you, and at the same time, I'm worried about this light going off, and how am I going to change it? And now I'm looking over here at the time, and I'm like, uh-oh, I still got 2 minutes and 20 seconds that before I get to commercial break. And then in my brain, I'm trying to decide, okay, I need to pay attention to what I'm saying, but at the same time, I'm worried about this light going off, and I got to stretch it for 2 minutes. And then it's like, just relax. Like that couldn't have been a more beautiful example of what actually is happening in my world right now. And the how beautiful that is that how many times does that happen in a day? How many times? Because all of a sudden, what happened to me? I saw the red light. I got threatened. I got worried. My sympathetic response happened. My heart rate went up. My blood pressure went up. I just shut down my digestive system. Like all of a sudden, my reproductive system and my posture started to shut down because I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to make it to the commercial to change the battery. And then you start talking negative to yourself because then you're like, why didn't you fix the battery before the show started? You could have changed them out. Why haven't you timed that out? Why haven't you timed out how many days that it's been since you've changed the batteries? Because you know that those batteries are going to go down. See, then all of a sudden this self-talk starts happening. And then we get into this negativity, and then we start getting sick. Right? We start getting sick. And over this little red light on the back of this little microphone right here. That was great. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this last 30 seconds and I'm going to recompose myself, right? Because that's really what we have to do in order to go forward. I got to recompose myself right here. I got to stretch this out for 20 more seconds, and then I can change this battery during the commercial break, and then we can get back to some of the things that happen inside the body when this right side, left side brain gets out of control. So, so you can't script this stuff. Sometimes it's just that good, you know? You guys stick around. We'll be right back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. This is a live radio show and a live social media show that we're doing at the same time right now. So give me 1 second. Now we got a green light. You know how comforting that is? now, now I got a green light on my little microphone right here, and I can relax. Now the threat is gone. Now I've gotten out of my right brain because I've gotten past this threat, and now I can move the information back over to my left brain and I can work out the details of the show. Now I can say, okay, how are we going to break down the rest of this show? How are we going to make this show make sense? How are we going to share this information, right? Like all the things that I prepared for and how the show is supposed to work. And it's like the difference between being able to function smoothly and being stressed out was the difference between a red light and a green light. And that happens to us over and over and over and over and over again in our environment. So what we're going to get into when we talk on the other side of the break here is we're going to get into this internal environment versus our external environment. And I want to show you all of those things. If you go back from last night and the night before, last night what we said was physical, chemical, and mental emotional stress. Physical, chemical, and mental emotional stress is what causes subluxation, interference in your nervous system. And what I'm talking about right now, tonight, is central nervous system. I'm talking about brain and spinal cord. So that's the central nervous system. And if you've got overactivity of one side of your brain, or overactivity of the other, or underactivity of one side of your brain, then you're going to start to notice things that are happening in your life. And it's going to manifest itself into problems. It's going to manifest itself into problems in your body. And they're problems that you've never thought of before, and no one's ever told you before. But when you finally start to understand how it works, and you get this idea of right side and left side brain function, then you're just like, well, no wonder I've got acid reflux. Like, no wonder I have to take Protonics or Nexium or Rolaids or Tums or whatever the thing is, right? It's like, no wonder. It's like, well, wait a minute. You're telling me that my acid reflux had nothing to do with the deficiency of Rolaids in my bloodstream. And I'm going to tell you, yes, that's 100% true. You didn't get a headache because you didn't have enough Tylenol in your bloodstream. But you just didn't know what was happening. Let me get us back on. Okay, everybody, this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, and we're back, and we're rocking tonight. And um, so, yeah, so let's get back. Let's get back to it, and let's talk about the things that happen in our body. And what I was about to say was about the sphincters, right? This you've got acid in your stomach. Let's just talk about this, okay? Because we've got 12-year-olds that are having acid reflux problems. We've got 10 and 12-year-olds that are having this problem. Because you know what used to happen? Used to, back when I was a kid, and I'm old enough now to be able to say, I'm able to say this, and a lot of you guys that are listening to the show can say the same thing. But when we were about 3 months old, we rolled over on our tummies and we got our eyes up and we started looking around at our environment. We started looking with our eyes up. And we didn't know it at the time, but there was a neurology that was taking place inside of our brain. There was a pathway that started firing. And what we started doing is we started firing up this frontal lobe. We started really starting to fire up this frontal lobe on both sides. And that frontal lobe is what inhibited flexion. And we started to cross crawl. So we crawled, and then we crawled until we could find something to pull up on. So the fireplace was a good thing, a coffee table was a good thing, a couch might be a good thing. And we would crawl over to those things and pick ourselves up. And a lot of us fell and tripped right into that coffee table or that edge of that fireplace, and we got those little scars right above our eyeballs. And one thing is really cool is that very, very few of us hit our eyeball. A lot of us hit our face and our head right there on our eyebrow, but we didn't hit our eyeball. Why? Because our head moved just quick enough. When we were falling, it created a response to move our head so that we hit the top of our head, not our eyeball, so it didn't knock our eye out. Some of us weren't that fortunate, but most of us were. But once we started crawling and we got on our feet, we almost never got off our feet until the sun went down. Right? We were full speed on our feet, running, all over the place. Mama was having to chase us everywhere. One time my brother climbed up on top of the McDonald's, the playground in McDonald's, got on top of the Hamburglar, and he was sitting up there. He's about 3 years old, sitting up on top of that deal. My mom was, she just had a newborn, my little daughter, my sister, but that's the way we used to live. Right? We were outside running, playing, riding our bikes all day long. I remember first grade, second grade, third grade, we were moving on our feet all day long, moving. And what were we doing? We were charging up the power to our right hemisphere and kicking things over to our left hemisphere. We were giving ourselves enough power. So we were balancing our brains. And they say that the frontal lobe doesn't even get developed until about the age of 25. But that's if you were born at 3 months, you rolled over, and then you started crawling, and then you got on your feet, and then you stayed on your feet for 25 years. Then your frontal lobe developed. Then you finally had enough frontal lobes to be able to make some good decisions and not be stupid. And that's what that frontal lobe kind of helps. It's like the executive center of our brain. Nobody had acid reflux when I was in third grade. There wasn't a third grader probably in the United States. I don't know. There might have been 4 of them or something like that. Like this attention deficit disorder problem, this Ritalin problem, this like all of these issues that we have today with kids, they didn't exist back in the day. And I don't remember any of my friends taking Tums or Rolaids when we were in third grade, right? Protonics, we got to go get some sort of, I don't know what all the names of them are, but because what's happening now, that child at 3 months old rolls over, that child starts to crawl, and then what happens? Mom puts a phone or an iPad right in front of the child, and the child's eyes go back down, and the child looks and sits in the floor and plays with the iPad. And we've been concerned about the content on the iPad or the phone. And there's a certain amount of concern that's valid, in my opinion, about what's happening with that. But we're missing the big boat. We're missing the big picture, because what we're not understanding is the movement and the neurology that it takes to develop the frontal lobe in a 25-year process. What we're happening now is the kids are sitting down looking at their phones. They're everywhere, all day long, everywhere, phones. Our eyes are down and our head is down. So what is that doing? It's getting us off our feet, and our eyes have a lot to do with the way that our brain functions. And so now we've got children that have acid reflux, or you may have acid reflux as an adult. Okay, there's a dietary component to this acid reflux, but there's also a neurological component to the acid reflux, because the left hemisphere is these sphincters, the sphincter between my esophagus and my stomach is controlled by my parasympathetic nervous system. My parasympathetic nervous system. My rest and recover nervous system. It's the one that controls the sphincters on the top and the bottom of our body, all of them. They're controlled with parasympathetic activity. So what's happening when we are stuck in the right hemisphere and we've got dampened left brain activity? If we've got dampened left brain activity, we have decreased tone of the sphincter. It doesn't close all the way. It won't contract and close. And it won't contract and close, then the acid from our stomach will leak up into our esophagus, and it's not supposed to be in our esophagus. It's supposed to be in our stomach, and it'll burn a hole in our esophagus, or we'll get heartburn because of that. Now, I did a show a couple weeks ago where I went over a study a couple of weeks ago that said critical events like heart attacks and strokes and organ function malfunctions, there is a connection with an overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system. There's an overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system before you have a heart attack. We're not getting parasympathetic activity. So what does this fight or flight response do? Just think about it. If you get scared, if someone sneaks up on you and scares you, or something frightens you, what is one thing that's going to happen? Your heart rate's going to go up. What's another thing? Your blood pressure is going to go up. What's another thing? And this is really important too, because if we could look at everything that happens in the center of our body, including our cerebellum. Now, your cerebellum is a small, broccoli-looking piece of brain that's at the back of your brain, and it's super, super important in the way that you function. And your cerebellum, the textbook things that they say the cerebellum does is balance, coordination, and posture. Now, coordination gets very, very tricky because of the way that your brain fires, and it fires down into the middle part of your brain, and then that sends to this. There's a connection to the cerebellum, and then that will reroute itself back up to the motor cortex, and then that will come down to your muscles. That's where Parkinson's becomes a problem, because we have this disruption in that pathway. But balance, coordination, and posture. Whenever we increase sympathetic activation, whenever we have too much fight or flight response, we're going to start to lose everything in the core of our body. And number one is going to be digestion. And there's going to be your upset stomach. How many times do you have upset stomach before a heart attack? My man died a couple weeks ago in Littlefield, and I talked to his wife the next day because I didn't see it coming, because I missed it, and he said to me, his wife said, he wouldn't ever eat much because he had such upset stomach, and he didn't mention that to me at all, and it's like, wow, that was a sign. It was like, wait, what's going on? Bad breath is another one. Bad breath is not, if you've got bad breath, it's like, hey, we've got some issues going on in our digestive tract, right? Constipation and diarrhea, irritable bowel syndrome, right? You're like, this whole thing is disrupted. And I'm not going to get into the microbiome tonight because I do want to take that as a whole show, and leaky gut, and I want to get into that. But that's one of the things that happens when your right hemisphere fires. When sympathetic fires too much, then one of the things is you get leaky gut. And that's a thing. It's not just a saying, it's a real physiological thing. It's an event. And that will cause a whole cascade of problems. And we'll get into that when we get into leaky gut. But digestion is going to start to go haywire. It's going to be off. The next one is immune system. And what we know is the left hemisphere is what controls our immune system, has the majority. Let me make sure I'm saying this very clearly. The brain is involved in everything. The right hemisphere and the left hemisphere is involved in one manner or the other in everything. So when I say that, it's like the right hemisphere does this and the left hemisphere does that. It's not by itself. It's in relation to the other hemisphere. But what we know is that the majority of left side brain is what controls your immune system. It's even known. They did an article in the Annals of Neurology. We'll learn this when, and I was just talking to MJ and Katia and Joe this last weekend. Those are docs, friends of mine in New Mexico, Dr. Fraley and Ruidoso and MJ and Katia Lewis and Roswell. And MJ even sent me some slides, and I had I'd already seen those slides, but it's from Dr. D'Onofrio, who was he was the head of the Chiropractic Neurology Board. He practiced for 30 years. He was a really cool dude. He's passed away, but when we were in school, he would teach us a lot of this stuff. But he's one, and on his slideshow, he's got one slide that says that skin prick test for allergy response. You know how if you go to the allergy doctor, and the allergy doctor pricks your skin or puts a bunch of stuff on your skin, and you find out that you're allergic to ragweed and cats and wheat and all this stuff, right? Because there's some sort of skin response. The skin response will dampen when you have left brain damage. If we were to go in and take out part of your left cortex, your immune system response to your allergies would go down. If we were to take out part of your right cortex, it would go up because the right cortex no longer would be turning off the left side. So now we get overactivation of the left side. And we could do that too. We can have all this overactivation of the left side and the right side's dampened. And that's a person that's just hyper focused. It's like I've had parents tell me with kids before, they'll be like, they could just sit there and they could just look they're like watching TV and they're just looking right at the TV, and everybody else in the room can just leave. We just get in the car and go someplace, and they'll just be sitting there just looking at, you can't hardly get them to break their focus at all. And if you do, they get really mad. Yeah, because anger is another thing that the left hemisphere does. So that's an overactivation of that left hemisphere, but that's an immune response. So the immune system is driven by the left hemisphere. Just remember that, okay? And if we have overactivation of the right hemisphere and underactivation of the left hemisphere, we will get decreased immune response. You'll get colds and flus, and you can't get well. And it's like, I'm sick all the time and all that sort of thing. And remember, always remember this. The initial stage of the immune response is inflammation, which again has it's a neurological component and a dietary component. Inflammation is not just your diet. Inflammation is your brain. It's the subluxation. It's interference in your nervous system. It's what's causing your brain to be imbalanced, which now has an impact on your immune system. The next one is your reproductive system. And your reproductive system, men will have low testosterone. Women will have abnormal cycles. They'll have heavy cycles. They'll have issues with hormones and hormone imbalances and all that sort of thing. You'll get all kinds of issues with your reproductive system with increased sympathetic firing. And your thyroid gland gets involved in all that. You'll also have thyroid function. You'll get decreased thyroid function. And so you'll have thyroid issues, which also goes along with adrenal gland issues, and with this whole this HPA axis activity that's in that right hemisphere. So reproduction is not going to work. It makes total sense if you just backed up and looked at it from a big picture standpoint. If you're in a tiger fight, if there's a tiger, I always say this when I'm talking to patients in the office. It's like, if Leslie looked really cute. She wore a sweater that and Leslie's my wife, for you guys that haven't come to the office yet. She runs our front desk and handles our office. And Leslie she wore a white sweater, kind of like the USC cheerleaders, but it had a double T on it today because Texas Tech's playing tonight. And so she had on that sweater that I got her for Christmas. And it's the first time that she's worn it. And I knew she was going to look really cute in it when I bought it. I got a little grief from my daughter. She thought it was stupid that I bought it because it wasn't her style. But I was like, you know what? I've known this gal, your mom, for a long time, and I know she's going to look cute in this sweater. And she did. She looked really cute in this sweater. But if there was a tiger sitting in the hallway between here and the front desk, and I whistled at Leslie and I said, hey, you look really cute in that sweater. Do you think that's going anywhere? Do you think my advancements are going to, do you think there's any chance that we're going to proceed with any of that flirtation right there if there's a tiger sitting in the room? No. Reproduction is going to shut down. If you're stressed out, you're not interested in reproducing. Why would you? You're not going to reproduce, as sexy as it sounds. You're not going to reproduce in the middle of a tiger fight. It's not going to happen, right? And I'm not going to go any further than that, or this show's going to get R-rated instead of G-rated. So, all right, that's the next one. And then this last one is posture. And now we start getting into orthopedics. Okay? Now we're talking about posture because one of the things that cortisol will do when your adrenal glands fire is cortisol will inhibit your cerebellum. It'll turn it off. And this is where headaches, neck pain, shoulder problems, low back disc problems, hip disorders, knee problems, plantar fasciitis in the bottom of your foot, all of these orthopedic problems that we have, now they come into play from a neurological standpoint because of the stress response, the overactivity of the sympathetic nervous system, firing down to the adrenal gland and turning off the cerebellum. Balance is a huge one in older people. Balance is a really big deal. Have you ever noticed how balance problems, vestibular problems in the ear, balance problems are also related to neck problems, which are also have a lot to do with hip problems. You ever notice how hip replacement people have, it's like there's a balance problem, there's an orthopedic problem. I got to have my hip replaced. Why? Why do you have to have your hip replaced? There's lots of different reasons, but what did it go bad? Why did the knee go bad in the first place? Why is a knee that's a hinge wearing out on the inside? It's a lot of times it's wearing out on the inside because the foot is pronated. Your foot is flat on the inside of your foot, which is causing your knee to rotate in. And that knee rotating in is also a result of your femur that's rotating in, which is a result of abnormal hip glute muscle function, which has a lot to do with what's going on in your brain. It's like, yes, this is where This is where orthopedics comes into play. And most of the time, this is why you go see the chiropractor. You probably don't go see the chiropractor because you have low testosterone, because you don't know that you should go see the chiropractor when you have low testosterone. And let me tell you how we handle low testosterone, right? What do we do? If you go to the doctor, they do a blood test on you, and they tell you that you have low testosterone. What are they going to do? They're going to give you testosterone pellets, right? They're going to give you something to try to drive your testosterone up. But they're not going to say ever, why is your testosterone low in the first place? They're not going to analyze your right hemisphere of your brain. They're not going to analyze your HPA axis. They're not going to look and see if you've got oversympathetic stimulation that's driving your testosterone levels down. They're not going to do any of that. They're just going to say, this is going to go back to what we talked about last night. You go to the doctor with a problem, they do the exam, and then they give you a diagnosis and a treatment plan, which is drugs and surgery. They don't ever ask the question, why are you having this problem? And it's like, we should address the reason that you're having this problem. And that's what we do at our office. We address the reason that you're having the problem, because I want to solve your problem, right? So that posture one, it gets into a lot of stuff. Now, let me make sure that I say this tonight, because it's really, really important. You can take this information and understand it from a mental, emotional, stressful way, right? That we drew out our little graph last night, and we had our symptom line, and we had our physical, chemical, and mental, emotional stresses on it, right? And that's what led us into this conversation between, because it sounds like we're talking about just mental, emotional stress. And we're not. We're talking about sympathetic and parasympathetic activity in the brain. We're talking about right side and left side activity in the brain. We're not just talking about mental, emotional stress, because you can have no mental, emotional stress. You can be totally mentally, emotionally balanced. You don't have any anxiety. You don't have any depression. You're not threatened. You're well off. You got everything under control. You're in a great situation in life. You're not stressed out. But if you drink a Dr. Pepper, that creates sympathetic firing in your right hemisphere, because now all of a sudden your diet, now look at your diet from a standpoint is it congruent with health? I was talking to some cute girls that I take care of. They're youngsters, elementary school age, and they rescued well, the girl told me today she went to the park and fed the ducks. She got some bread and she went to the park and she fed the ducks. She's like, I don't know, first, second grade, something like that. Cute as a button. And just West Texas as you can get. She's great. I love her, and got a little lisp and all that sort of thing. And she's telling me about feeding the ducks. And I said, that's really strange. Have you ever thought about how strange that is, that ducks like bread so much? Because where would ducks be able to get bread? How would ducks know that they liked bread when they can't make bread? And then she was telling me about, and she just looked at me, she was like, that's strange, right? If the same thing was, she was telling me they rescued a little baby calf at one time that fell off a truck. I don't know, it's kind of a weird story, but they rescued it. And she was telling me one of the things, they used to feed it carrots. And then she said, and what it loved the most was animal crackers. And I said, well, there you go again. How would a cow get animal crackers? And she was just like, wow, that's really strange. Like, why would a cow like animal crackers? How would a cow in nature ever get an animal cracker? They wouldn't, right? They would eat grass, right? And so I'm using that to say this. Our diet can create sympathetic stress inside our body. Our diet, if it's out of balance and it's omega-6s and omega-3s, and I know for you new people, we really haven't gotten into that yet, but if our diet is super high in and let's say omega-3s, vegetable oil, if we're eating a lot of vegetable oil, we're eating a lot of peanut butter, we're eating a lot of corn chips, now all of a sudden we've got an increased amount of inflammation. We got an increased amount of inflammation. And now what is that doing to our brain? It's like, oh, wait, hold on a second. This is threatening to me. My diet by itself can create sympathetic response. You put a Tylenol inside your body, what do you think your body's doing? It's like poison. Like you put fructose inside your body. High fructose corn syrup, according to Dr. Lustig, is a poison. So you drink a Coke, you have high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is a poison. What do you think poison is going to fire your rest and recover nervous system, or you think poison is going to fire your sympathetic nervous system? Will your body perceive that poison as a threat? Yes, it will. And the same thing will happen to you if you're subluxated. If your spine's misaligned, you will drive your sympathetic nervous system because your brain detects that as a threat. The same thing, that's where we get into all the orthopedics. And we've run out of time tonight, so we're not going to have a chance to really get into that. But then we'll just pick it up where we left off for tomorrow night. And I'll show you how diet and musculoskeletal issues does that same thing, fires that sympathetic nervous system and causes that whole fight or flight response. Thank you guys for watching the show. That's all I got for you tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night at 6.